Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we help you resolve your long COVID and chronic fatigue syndromes naturally so that you can get back to living your best life. So, really excited about today's episode because we're going to be talking about how to create really a family system for cooking, especially when you are a parent who has fatigue. I know this firsthand when I had fatigue, what it took in order to be able to continue the function of our life and our family. And we're going to be learning today from Katie Kimball. So let's learn a little bit about her. So Katie Kimball helps change kids' relationship to food, both through work in the kitchen and helping parents of picky eaters. She's a former teacher, two-time TEDx speaker, writer, and mom of 4 kids. She created the Kids Cook Real Food eCourse, which was recommended by the Wall Street Journal as the best online cooking class for kids. Her blog, Kitchen Stewardship, helps families stay healthy without going crazy, and she's on a mission to connect families around healthy food, teach every child to cook, and instill those all-important life skills with her Life Skills Now summer camps. Katie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you too, Evan. I'm thrilled to get to share with your audience because they are just in such need, I think. They're tired.
They definitely are. They're tired and, they're struggling to oftentimes make the logistics of home life work. It's kind of like they want to feed their kids well, but it's really hard when you are so tired to take care of some of the little stuff like standing for extended periods of time and helping people get the right food on the table. And so I'm really excited that you have this concept of having like a family team to help life function, especially for these people who have fatigue. So can you tell me a little bit about what a family team looks like and why it's important?
Well, when I think about your audience in particular, it's like the family is a team, whether we like it or not. And when the head of the team is on the DL, when they're down and out, it makes it really, really hard. It means the rest of the team have to be team players and pitch in. And so I think a lot of us here in America, we tend to run maybe more like a company where the CEO, the mom, or the dad is doing all the work and everyone else is just sort of benefiting from it. Maybe they make their own beds. But I think a lot of kids aren't pitching in as much around the house. But when I think of a family team, it's just a beautiful structure where everyone feels like they have ownership. Everyone feels like they have shared responsibility, like they have contribution. And there are actually some beautiful benefits to kids' mental health when they get those gifts of contribution, responsibility, and ownership too.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that. The challenge is going from like A to Z, right? Where right now the kid is used to having everything kind of like done for them. Because sometimes it's just easier to do it instead of like trying to explain it and trying to teach the kid or the employee about the process that you have and like what you want the outcome to be, right? So then how do you go from A to Z so that you get these actualized kids and other family members who are stepping up?
Yeah, I mean, you said sometimes it's easier to do it yourself. It's almost always easier to do it yourself, especially, I mean, if the child's young, then they're not going to be very proficient at it. So it's easier to do yourself. If the child's older, they're probably going to have pushback. And
Hmm.
then that's just a pain in the patootie too. So that's part of it is, and I know with fatigue, mental fatigue comes with this too, but I think parents' first hurdle to get over is convincing ourselves that it's worth it. Convincing ourselves that if we can take a little extra time, a little extra, like, I don't want to say battling through. It should never be a battle, but a little extra, like dealing with the pushback and rolling through that and working with the child. It's so worth it on the other end, both for your time and for the kids. So I'm at a place, I'm at Z pretty much. My kids are ages 11 to 20, and I'm not saying life is perfect, but there are 3 of them who are old enough to cook an entire meal per week on their own, and my husband takes one. So I have fewer than 50% of the meals in a week that I even have to make. And like that's the dream, and especially for people who are having trouble standing up at the counter, like wouldn't that be amazing to delegate? But if you're at A, how do you get there? So step one is you have to get over the mental roadblock that it is too hard, because if everything's hard, all of parenting is hard. But if we can slow down if we can talk about what we're doing and pass on the skills first and then build that family team environment, that culture of a family where we say, everyone eats, so everyone cleans up, and everyone lives in this home, so everyone needs to help. We can really, I think, build ownership. So one of the chore systems that we use in our house is that we have this like list in a sheet protector, and each kid has to choose 6 chores per week. They can switch it up, they can get in their rut, it doesn't matter. They just have to be done by Sunday after lunch. So some of my kids might do like one per day after school. Most of them bunch them on Saturday morning. My 11-year-old, my youngest, he always thinks tomorrow himself will be in a better mood. So he's like, I'm gonna do half of mine today, and then like tomorrow morning before church, that other guy, he'll do the other part, because there aren't any consequences, there's no nagging, there's no reminding until it hits like Sunday after brunch. Then the rule is you don't get to recreate until your chores are done. Or reverse, you may recreate when your chores are done, right? Or your family contributions, family responsibilities. I know sometimes words really, really matter. My kids still realize their chores, even when we call them family contributions. So I don't know if those words matter all that much to the children. But the point is that they get to take ownership of those. They get to kind of time budget, which is a whole executive functioning skill in itself, thinking about and learning about like, how do I like to run my life? Do I like to chip away at it? Do I like to bunch them? And it's really been very interesting to watch my kids over 10 years. We've had the same system, to watch them like figure out their favorite. And it's nice for me because again, it's not nagging all the time. There's no need for parent-child interaction. Not that we don't interact, but there's no need for me to like be on them, so to speak, until that deadline. And then it's very simple. Like, oh, you would like to play on your tablet? Show me your list. You would like to go to a friend's house? Show me your list. And it's just like this very objective passageway to play.
That's really nice. And so tell me a little bit more about this list. What was the name for it?
It's just for us, it's just our weekly chore list, our family weekly chore list. And so the kids, there's all the things that need to be done in a week. So bathroom mirrors are different than bathroom floors, and then sweeping the kitchen, wiping kitchen cupboards. There's just, every household's probably a little different on what they need to have done every month or every week. But it's not your personal stuff. It's not making your bed. It's not cleaning your room. It's the family spaces. And so it really shows that, and they can see mom and dad check stuff off too and put our little M and our little D, or, my kids each have different initials. And so that's how we do it, is you check it off when you do it, and you put your initial in there, and then we're all visibly working together to keep the house in order, and keep each other sane.
Nice. And so this would be the kind of thing, if somebody was creating this from scratch, where they would just document what they're doing on a weekly basis in order to keep the house clean.
Right. Yeah. The first step would be what needs to be done. And then of course there's the logistics. So there's always the system of how do we decide who does what. And that's kind of what I just described. And ideally that's building a little bit of that ownership, that responsibility, and that contribution feel. And then there's the logistics. Well, how do I teach a kid to clean a toilet? How do they know like what the objective is in cleaning this toilet? And that really comes down to doing it with them, showing them, talking it through. It's amazing. Like, Evan, it's not hard, right? It's not rocket science, but sometimes we're so in the nitty gritty of our lives. We're so in the flow that like, we just don't think about it. So it takes listening to, Katie Kimball on a podcast saying, next time you clean the toilet, you could grab your 8-year-old and you could say, here's what I'm going to do. And you just talk it out. And maybe that's it. And you don't have to slow down at all. And then the next time you grab the 8-year-old and he or she does one part of it, maybe they just squirt the sauce, whatever you call, squirt the cleaner into the bowl. Or maybe they do the scrubbing, and you talk about how you make a pattern and how you look to see if you've gotten it all. Whatever your own logistics are. I think just remembering that they are capable, remembering that it is our job to pass on these skills, and it's far, far better for them to learn it at 8 and 10 and 12 and even 4 years old than it is to be 18 or 19 and just smashed with all the responsibilities of adulthood. Like, so that's one of the benefits for the kids, is that adulthood does not crash down on them quite so hard, but then they do have other personal benefits even as that 4 or 8 or 12-year-old.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And because life is coming and it's important for them to have those life skills, which I want to get to in just a moment. Um, but yeah, I think that it occurs to me, when I'm kind of training people, my employees to do certain things. We talked about, before we got online about having SOPs or standard operating procedures,
Mhm.
is that you could potentially also take a video and that they could potentially come back to that video about how to do something if they needed to in the future so that you wouldn't have to repeat yourself as well. Now, that all depends on how much media you're giving your kid and what sort of access they have to any sort of library of media or if they have a phone or whatever. But, it's all about kind of like making this easy for you, once you kind of share that information, I would imagine. What do you think about that idea?
I love that. And actually, to make that kid friendly, for like the 10 and under crowd who probably, possibly, hopefully don't have their own device, you can just grab a piece of scrap paper and tape it to the wall in the space where that cleaning happened and draw some simple pictures, and you're
Mhm.
seated while you do that. You know what I mean? Like how do we balance this? Like, Katie, you're just telling me to do more work. But but if you're writing it out one time on a simple piece of scrap paper, and then they can have some pictorial reminders right there next to the whatever it is, the toilet or the broom or whatever tool they're using. And I think so the next step, I kind of talked about, okay, you show them, maybe you start to have them do it. What kids and parents really need, especially when mom or dad is kind of down and out, and it's harder to parent, it's harder to spend that quality time with your kids. We need to make every single moment with our kids quality time,
Mm.
even if it's productive time. And so if, my 8-year-old is cleaning the toilet, and this is a true story. I didn't teach any of my kids to clean the toilet for whatever reason. They knew all the like household chores, but except toilet, I thought it was too gross. And when my youngest Gabe was 8, he said, Mom, everybody else has like their things, and I always do the easy stuff because I'm the baby of the family, which was totally true. And he said, Can you teach me to clean the toilet? I'm like, Yep, apparently I should. You know what I mean? I know, yes. Like, and then of course it was not as cool as he thought it would be, like the second or third time. But here's how you keep the kids somewhat motivated, right? I think all kids deeply desire time with their parents, and all
Mhm.
kids, we are wired for connection.
Mhm.
We need to have that connection. So for months, when Gabe would clean the toilet, he wasn't by himself, but I wasn't doing his job with him, right? Because if I'm doing his job with him, now he's not saving me any time. He's not saving me any energy. But I could be cleaning the bathroom counter or cleaning the mirror or sweeping the floor. I could be seated, sweeping the floor. Or like if I'm really in the throes of fatigue, I could be seated, maybe reading a book to him while he's cleaning the toilet. So we're side along working, and he
Mhm.
feels like he's, at a cleaning party with mom. And it makes it so much easier. Very few complaints when we were
Mhm.
doing tasks in the same room. Very many complaints when I say now that he doesn't need me there anymore, time to go clean the toilet.
Right.
So I'll still try to look for some opportunities where I can like do other tasks in the room. Um, but there are some positives there. One, the child can be slow because they will be, and it doesn't really hurt you because you're still doing whatever you're doing at your own pace. And at the end, you still got to skip one job, right?
Right.
Out of all the little parts of cleaning the bathroom.
Mhm.
And two, you have a chance to reflect and redirect, meaning, I see that you just swished back and forth, but I don't know if you got the whole bowl. What's the pattern we talked about or whatever? You know what I mean? Like extrapolate that to any task. The child's going to make some mistakes. They're kids, they're just learning. And so it's really nice to be close and just kind of use your words and kind of keep half an eye on them. And I'm trying to imagine the level of fatigue that your audience is dealing with. Like maybe they aren't cleaning their own bathroom. But so don't do the bathroom, right? Do the dusting or do some sweeping such that you can be like resting in your chair. And as long as you're engaging with your child, they don't feel like a slave in your household. Or you know what I mean? Like people on
Right.
social media will say, "Oh, Katie, you just want your kids to do all your work. You are so lazy." And I'm like, "Oh no, this is way harder. If I was lazy, I would do it myself."
Mhm.
So I think even if you are in the throes of fatigue and you're just seated and you're resting or you're sipping on your electrolyte drink or whatever, as long as you're hanging out with the kid and talking with them, and you can be talking about your day and interspersing little notes about what they're dusting, then it's still a point of connection for them. And it's much more positive than it is a task, or a drudgery.
Yeah, and I think that, asking for help is a really important part of this for people who are fatigued, and so you can really sit down with your family and say, hey, I'm struggling with fatigue. My energy is not what it should be. I've got enough energy to work, but that's about it. I really need some help out at home. And people are going to, and your family is really, they want to support you. They love you. And so I think that, being vulnerable with them is important. What do you think?
Mhm. Oh yeah. I mean, I talk to parents all the time because I teach kids to cook. And so a lot of parents get a little vulnerable and say, I don't know how to cook. Like how are we going to do this together? And I just encourage them to learn right along with their kids. I think it's so valuable for kids to see parents humble, vulnerable, lifelong learning, admitting that we don't know something and we're learning it right along with them. That gives them a thrill. Like, especially if they like learn a little faster than you. Sometimes I play dumb on purpose. And you let your child correct you lovingly. I think that's all part of those connection points, to be honest. And it really can build up a child's confidence to know that they are doing real tasks right alongside mom and dad or for mom and dad. And I think, I think there's ways to go about it that can be better than others, maybe. Gratitude is huge. We got to make sure that regardless of what our kids are doing, that we are so grateful that we're thanking them overtly right to their face, that we're thanking them in front of other family members, and that we use words like the family team or the family unit, or, this is how we love each other here in the Kimball family. Like you can make it like little commercial taglines that get in your head. What
Hmm.
a great thing to have your kid's head every time they pick up a dust rag or a broom or whatever, think, oh, this is how we do it in the Kimball family. That's incredibly powerful for the rest of
Hmm.
their lives.
Yeah, there's a lot of pride in
Mhm.
attaching that family name to something. Yeah. And
Mhm.
oftentimes I'm also recommending like the compliment sandwich, and so or the feedback sandwich where basically if you want to coach them on something, people generally respond better to, hey, this is what you're doing well. This is what you need to work on, and this is what you're doing well as well. So ending with a positive oftentimes makes it a little bit easier for them to kind of get feedback, but it gives them an opportunity to do well with feedback, to get feedback, and to make changes so that they can do the job the way that you want them to do. And I was speaking to somebody recently who was talking about hiring adults these days, and there's a lot of kids, in their 20s and 30s who've never really been given feedback. And so now you're giving them feedback as an adult and they're crying and they don't know what to do with it. So it's really important to make sure that you're giving feedback, but you can give feedback in a way or coaching in a way, not criticism, so that they can improve themselves, but they don't feel criticized.
Oh, I love that. Coaching, not criticism. It's a good ring to it. Yeah, and I have that Life Skills Now summer camp, and so we teach more than just cooking. We teach all like soft and hands-on life skills. And I think there's a real desire for that right now. I think a lot of parents are hearing those stories about the kids, the youth, the young adults in their 20s and 30s who aren't functioning very well in the adult world and thinking, ooh, I don't want that for my kids. I want
Right.
better than that for my kids. And so we are realizing as a general group of parents that we need to give them jobs, responsibility, actual skills, whether it's executive functioning, organizational type skills, or do you know how to clean a toilet? Like even if the robot can vacuum, it's still worthy to teach our kids these skills just for the sake of learning how to learn and learning how to contribute. That feeling of contributing and receiving constructive feedback, so important. Here's the thing. Okay, so parents, lean into the fact that your kids are young and call that out in both directions, meaning if they make a boo-boo, if they make a mistake, you say, you know what though? You're only 6. Of course you're still learning. Of course you're going to make mistakes. I don't expect you to be perfect, right? So like you lean into that when they make mistakes, and lean into it to raise the bar. Oh my goodness. Like you are only 6 years old. Do you know how many 6-year-olds know how to do task ABC?
Hmm.
Probably not very many, kiddo. You are pretty amazing. You know what I mean? Like that's so cool. I know my third son, John, he's a freshman in high school now, but when he was 7, he asked to use a chef's knife because he'd been using a paring knife since age 4. He was like, "Mom, I think I'm ready." I'm like, "Okay, we'll level you up." And he's the one out of all 4 of my kids who most often says, "I bet other kids in my grade don't know how to do this." You know what I mean? And you can just hear that little like spark inside him. And we know that confidence doesn't stay with cleaning the stupid toilet. Confidence is confidence. That applies to his academics, his athletics, his social life, etc. So
Right.
it's that's where I say there are benefits to the kids. You're not just using your kids to take time and energy off of your plate that you don't have. You are building better people. You're building better human beings who are
Mhm.
mentally healthier and more ready to be productive in the world.
Yeah, all that success stacks, right? It's like when you get to a point where you're in college and it's time for a final exam, are you going to have anxiety and are you going to break down? Or are you going to know that you have done hard things in your life before, you have learned things and you can accomplish this, right?
Absolutely. Mhm.
Yeah. And this applies to grandparents as well. When you've got the kid, if it's a young kid, if it's a teenager, whatever, it's having these conversations. I think, so much of this is about treating the individual as an adult, you know, and 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 where you respect their opinion. And for me, I've got a teenager, she's 17. For me, it's more about like asking her questions and kind of leading her where I want her to go and trying to have those conversations. It doesn't go well if I just tell her what to do, right? I need to ask her, hey, I really need your help with this as part of the family.
Yeah, in the teen years, it shifts quite a
Mhm.
bit. The way that we have to interact with our kids. My daughter is 17 as well, so that's very interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
so what do you recommend? How does it need to shift?
well, I agree. It's very much more teamwork, much more sideways than top down.
Mhm.
Um, and and I think, I mean, we want to give all of our kids ownership, but ownership of decisions is one of the later things to go, right? So when my son was 8, he might have felt some ownership over the toilet, but he wasn't deciding how often to clean it, what cleaner to use. You know what I mean? And he
Mhm.
doesn't get to make very big decisions in his life. But the older you get, and with cell phones and car keys, we've got to train our kids to make good decisions, which comes down to what you just said. It's asking them questions
Right.
more than telling them things. Even just last night, it's we live in Michigan and we've had our first big snow of the year. So I, mentioned to my daughter, she was like, "Oh, driving to work was just terrible. I hate this snow." And I said, "Is it okay if we go over the, snow driving reminders?" And she was like, I think I know it." And she said a couple of things. And I said, "Well, do you remember what squaring up a turn means?" And she's like, no, I don't remember that one." Right. So yes, putting a question mark at the end of most sentences and passing on decision making. So with a 4-year-old, it's like, do you want to
Mhm.
wear this outfit or this outfit? Very simple decisions.
Right.
Both choices are acceptable to the adult. And so how
Mhm.
do we get from there to, well, you're a senior in high school. Should you have a curfew? Should I be taking your phone at night anymore? Because my daughter, your daughter do this? My daughter reminds me often that by next year she will
Right.
be out of the house and I won't be able to tell her anything about what to do.
Right.
Like, you're right. And so that has to change, especially at 16 and 17 and 18, the way we parent and the decisions we allow them to make. It feels much more collaborative at this stage.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of checking in that happens. So, my daughter is now, she has her phone in her room with her because next year she's going to, right? And so, I'm asking, I'm like, how did you sleep last night?
Mhm.
What time did you go to bed? And fortunately, she shares this information with me because she knows that I'm also not going to judge her. And so if she's like, I didn't get a lot of sleep, and it'd be like, were you distracted at all by your phone? And I'm
Mhm.
not judging, I'm just asking questions. Be like, just something to think about. And then she notices that she's not sleep, like she's getting less sleep, and then she's not functioning as well. And then I'm just trying to observe and notice things by saying, hey, Do you think that maybe you're tired or you're not performing as well in school because you're not getting enough sleep?
Hmm.
Just trying to plant the seed, right? So that they're thinking about my voice. She's thinking about my voice when I'm no longer there.
100%. And it's so hard to know how fast to let some of those responsibilities out. Like I said, my oldest is 20, so he's an adult, and I think he was overhearing a conversation with between us and his brother, who's a freshman in high school, about bedtimes or something. And he said to us, he's like, actually, thank you for giving me a ridiculously early bedtime that I was embarrassed about in high school. He said, because now that I'm totally in charge of my own bedtimes and go to bed stupid late, he's like, I feel the difference. And he said, I can look back at high
Mhm.
school and see how my peers performed with cognitively, on tests. And people would always say, oh, Paul, you're so good at everything. And he's a talented dude, but he said, I think I was just like more at peak performance because I wasn't super addicted to my phone and I wasn't on my phone at midnight and you were making me go to bed at ridiculous like 9 or 9:30 until his senior year. Like he got teased about his bedtime.
Sure.
And we didn't know if we were doing the right thing. It just felt like he has to get up so early. He should still go to bed. But he actually thanked us for that. So parents, hold that in your mind. And I mean, you all know what it feels like to be fatigued. Our teenagers who are staying up till midnight, that is not their circadian rhythm. Well, that is their circadian rhythm. It's the getting up for school that's really messing with them. But nobody likes that feeling of walking through like peanut butter all day because you're just so, and your limbs are so tired and your brain is clunking along. So we definitely want to give our kids better than that. So we've got to keep those sleep restrictions there, maybe a little longer than our peers.
Right.
Maybe our parent peers are letting their middle school kids choose their bedtime. Don't do that. I don't think it's not a good idea. You're an MD. I'm curious, how you feel about that, but I would say keep those bedtimes, keep some screen restrictions with, again, a gradual release of responsibility.
Right.
But basically, whatever the culture is doing, you should probably be a little more conservative if you want to raise kids who are peak performers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that there's so much comparison. My daughter's like, I'm going to bed earlier than all of my friends,
Yep.
right? And I'm like, and how are they doing? Right? We're worried about, I was like, and it doesn't matter that I'm an MD, right? So she's like, whatever, show me the research. And then I show her the research and she's like, Pa, whatever. Um, so, but yeah, it's just so important and just keep coming back to that. Like, we're going to do what's important for us. And being that I had chronic fatigue, my wife had chronic fatigue, like we know how important sleep time is, we know how important good food is, and these are we're trying to impart these things to her, and there's pushback, and so there has to be some flexibility there and acknowledgement, but not so rigid that it erodes the relationship. So it's like I don't want to be her best friend, right? But and I want to make sure that she's taken care of, and but there has to be some flexibility in there. How do you navigate that?
I read a book called Untangled by Lisa D'Amour. It's fantastic if you have girls. I wish I'd
Mhm.
read it when my daughter was 11. I read it when she was 16 because it's focused mostly on girls. But she talked about parents relaxing the rules. And so her example was her buddy in high school was told by his parents, you cannot wear this like one rocker band t-shirt every day. So every day he would tuck it in his back pocket and he would change on the way to school and end up wearing the contraband rocker band t-shirt. And she uses that example in her practice. She's a therapist and says to parents, here's the deal. The parents might have even known he was doing that. But had they just taken the rule away because he was breaking it anyway, as a teen, his job is to push the boundaries and become his own person and be independent. And so if
Right.
he didn't have that boundary to push, he would have to find another boundary to push. And maybe it would be one that's a little more dangerous to his physical or mental health than wearing a stupid t-shirt every day. Okay.
Mhm.
So her point was, and I really believe this is true, is that we have to set limits that are firm. And I always call it choice within boundaries. We want our kids to have some choices. We want them to have some agency, but the fences need to be solid. That when they bump up against a boundary that we have set, they understand that if they break it, And we know there are consequences, and we're not going to just move the fence because they pushed on it, because then they don't know when we'll stop. It's actually really anxiety inducing, whether it's a 2-year-old or a 17-year-old.
Right.
If the fence, the metaphorical boundary of your rule moves when they push it, they're going to have to keep pushing it just so that they know, when am I safe? Like, when do I have a grown up who's going to tell me when to stop? It's very scary if the grown-ups
Mhm.
aren't telling the children and teenagers when to stop. And so, yeah, when we talk about bedtimes and screen times with teens, we have to explain a little more. We can explain our why, but the boundaries should stay very firm according, I believe, to your family's values. And I know, we were talking about how you tell a lot of your community to cut certain foods. We're going to cut a couple inflammatory foods. We're going to focus on, some whole foods. And so how do we help our kids see that? Like, how do they fuel their teenage, adolescent, or, 5-year-old bodies, and gradually release that responsibility too, to take control of what they eat?
Right. Yeah, parenting is I mean, it's such an amazing growth opportunity, and it is so incredibly challenging. I apologize all the time to my daughter because there's something that often, if something comes up and I haven't thought something through, then the reaction that comes through is my parents, right? I mean, that's the rule that comes through. And it may not be the right rule for the situation or the right reaction or whatever. And so there's just so much apologizing that ends up happening where I'm like, you know what? I come back to her maybe 5 minutes, maybe 5 days. And I'm like, you know what? Remember when this happened? I was wrong, and I'd like to have more of a conversation about this because now I'm thinking about it and now I'm more conscious about it, right? And I think that um, um, that's because parenting is so hard and because our kids are constantly growing and they are pushing that envelope, that it's so easy to make these mistakes. Where do you feel that apologizing, we're doing all this great parenting stuff. I love it. Thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me. So where do you feel like apologizing comes into play as part of parenting?
Evan, all I could think when you were confessing to us that you apologize a lot to your kids was, that's why your daughter will tell you the truth about what time she goes to bed.
Mm,
Because you are open, that you're not perfect, and
mm,
that you make mistakes, and you let her see your thinking, and you let her see you adjust. So she trusts you. It's
mm.
huge. It's huge. You can't trust someone who's never apologized to you because you're not sure if they're fake or narcissistic or full of themselves. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
yeah, our kids need to see we're human. And that doesn't mean we move our boundaries like crazy and we're all flimsy and whimsical and stuff, and we don't have any rules. It means we let them see that it's okay to make mistakes. Oh, that's so powerful. So powerful. Yeah. And
Thank
then
you.
they know what a good apology looks like as
Right. And then
well.
you can also set a new rule and you can hold firm to it. You can be like, you know what, now that I've thought about this, let's have a conversation. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think of that? Yeah, and then you can have a conscious dialogue about it.
Yes. I know when I work with parents of picky eaters, a lot of the process I use to help the picky eaters build a better relationship with food comes down to routines and structure and expectations or lack thereof. And sometimes I'm asking parents to do some hard things or some things that might feel uncomfortable or counterintuitive to the way they were raised. And I say, you know what? It's always going to be a little tricky. A new routine is always going to be a little bumpy, but I want you to try any parenting decision you make, try to hold fast for at least 3 days, ideally 7, because you kind of need that time, that like squishy middle transition time to
Hmm.
figure out if you've done the right thing or figure out if it's going to work. So if you're always like changing your rule or adjusting things on the fly just because the kids are complaining or pushing back or it doesn't seem to work perfectly right away, then again, the kids don't know where the boundaries are. So I always say give it 3 to 7 days. Make the intentional change. That's when we're not like coming up with a parenting rule in the moment. Like I totally see your point. Like sometimes 5 minutes later, you're like, oh man, that was not a good idea. But if you're making an intentional decision, like I'm listening to Katie Kimball, she's saying, don't let my kids snack right before dinner, and that seems hard, but I'll just try it. You know what I mean? Like you make an
Right.
intentional choice. And so we've got to give ourselves and our families that transition time for kids to settle in. And then once they trust us and know that the boundary is going to stay there, then they tend to settle down. They tend to stop pushing back. So it's actually like not, it's not strict parenting, but they're strict boundaries because there's a difference there, right?
Hmm.
It's a loving boundary and the boundary is firm. It doesn't mean I'm like yelling from the treetops or something or being a strict parent, but we want to make our boundaries firm so that our kids understand that we have made an intentional choice
Right.
and the pushback actually will diminish a lot.
And sometimes we say, okay, this is the firm boundary, but we're going to try this out and see how it goes.
Right. Hmm.
Right. So that's like that 7 days that you're talking about. It's like, this is going to be firm, but then we're going to do this for a week and we're going to assess. We'll have a conversation.
Yeah. And I'm a super science geek. So I'm always explaining to my kids, or I'll explain to my parents with picky eaters, like the reason that we have a 90-minute minimum span between snacks and meals is because that's the time that we need to digest. And that's what's best for our bodies, whether we're 2 or 92. And so I think, I don't know, my kids probably get tired of me going teacher mode, and not every parent is going to have that teacher mode to slip into. But I think explaining what you're doing and why has a place, and the older your kids get, the more of a place it takes.
And now it's a lot easier to find the data and find the information because you can ask AI. You can
Exactly.
you can put in your question, you can get the response back. I'm using Perplexity a lot these days because I find that the sources are the most accurate of any of the AI right now. And so, you can ask that question and be like, all right, let's look at the research on sleep. What time should you be going to bed? Like what's recommended? What does the research say? Let's take a look at that and see. So
Yeah,
I
it's super
I
cool.
appreciate that. Yeah. So do you parent like your parents parented you?
Yes and no. My mom was a really intentional parent. She was a very critical thinker and read a lot of books, and I think she made a lot of really good parenting choices. My dad is 87, like he was born in the Great Depression, so he didn't I don't know. He didn't really parent. When you say like when you're not thinking and you say things that you wish you hadn't said because it sounds like your parents, that's my dad coming from me. Great guy, loving, church-going man. But I don't know that he really knew how to parent. He just told us what to do. So luckily he was usually at work. So I see a little bit of my mom coming out in me for sure, the good parts. Just yeah, the critical thinking and being when I'm gentle, like that's her coming through for sure. But I also have a lot more systems
Hmm.
than my mom did. So chores in my house growing up were like super random. We
Uh-huh.
might be asked to clean a bathroom one week, we might not the next week. Like here's some laundry we need to fold. They were very, very random. The only thing that you could be sure of is that you had to rake leaves in the fall. And so I think I mean, I hope that's a little nicer for my kids that there is a system and they just understand. And so it feels more of a family team than like whack-a-mole, which is what
Hmm.
chores in my childhood kind of felt like. And I definitely left home not knowing how to cook. And it was very tricky to figure out how to feed myself. And I burnt a lot of food and I definitely didn't know like the value of real food. I did a lot of processed food. So I did a lot of like reparenting myself, like growing up in my 20s, kind of figuring out like what foods will really nourish our family.
So then what did it take for you to become an intentional parent? Because it sounds like you had your mom was doing some of that, but then you kind of took the next step and you created systems. And so were you journaling? Were you reflecting? Did you just like have some downtime to actually think about what you were going to do as a parent?
Like you said, now parents can talk to AI. So luckily for me, I was parenting at the advent of kind of the internet and parenting blogs and the inundation of information. And
Mhm.
I'm a big reader as well. So I would definitely read information on the internet and read books. And just my poor kids, they've always been the guinea pigs. So I tried a lot of different discipline and parenting systems over the years, but there's a sense of true north
Mhm.
for me at least, and I hope most people have that where you can just tell what feels right. what feels like we're really valuing our children and we're really breathing life into them instead of maybe crushing some of the joy that they have, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember my mom saying that parenting is the most important job that we do, and it's the one that we're least prepared for,
Mm.
right? And I remember she took some classes by Chaim Ganat, I think back in the day in the 80s. Um, and I took some parenting classes. And I think a lot of this comes down to mindfulness. Like you said, true north. It's like, how does it feel in your body? Right. And I know for me, there was like, oh, she's not going to talk to me like that because, she's being disrespectful. My daughter was a teenager, but I had to let that stuff go. Like she was going to curse and she was going to push back. And like, how rigid did I want to be? Like, where was that line for me? Like, is that her acting out? Like, if she flicks me off, like, how am I going to react to that? Is that, and I found like that, that was more insecurity on my part or shame or guilt or, like if I could let things go and I wasn't seeing it as a personal affront, I could have a better relationship with her, which was different than I could never do that to my parents, right? And maybe it's a different time, maybe we're different people, but I think so much of it comes down to that mindfulness, like how do I want to be? What do I want this relationship to look like? How does it feel like for her on the other shoe, sort of thing. And so it's that intentionality that I think is really challenging, and it takes thought. It takes time to actually, not just reaction, right? You have to choose to be intentional.
You do. I wish I could do over the first 10 to 15 years because I mean, I'm a trained educator. Like that's what my college degree is in. So I had a little bit of a leg up compared to, other people just coming in with a finance degree or whatever. So I feel like I did a decent job, but connection is probably if I could talk to, my early parenting self and just the idea of co-regulating a nervous system and connecting with a child and using eye contact and touch and stuffing in the words when they are in high emotions and they're throwing a fit, whether it's a 2-year-old tantrum or a 17-year-old flicking you off, their brain is in no state to listen to language. And I
Right.
didn't know that. I didn't get that innately as a young mom. Like now I've read some more books, and I understand a little bit about how the brain works. And just that idea of just being calm. So I'm looking forward to being a grandparent. I'm only 45, and I'm like, I can't wait to be a grandparent because then I can like do some of the things that I didn't know how to do when my own kids were 2 and 5, just to
Right.
just hold the child or just give them some space to calm down and separate the teaching from the tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge.
Ooh.
I think that would have made a big difference in my own nervous system regulation as a young mom too, because I would get so worked up. My kid's throwing a tantrum. It's super embarrassing,
Right.
but it wasn't about me. Like you just said, I think we just kind of realized similar things about ourselves that when we're insecure in ourselves, we're parenting from more of a place of fear or a place of anger instead of intentionality. So again, looking forward to being a grandparent. I'm so excited.
And so much of this goes out to all of our relationships, right? Our spouses. Like, what if we didn't take things personally, in all of our relationships, right? That's
Conversation would be so much more chill, wouldn't it?
right. That's a mic drop right there. So this has been excellent. I got one last question for you before we start to wrap up. So, what do you think about allowance for kids? Some sort of
Ooh,
stipend.
this is a good one. And I'm so blessed to have worked with so many other experts. Like I said, in Life Skills Now, we get to teach finances. And so I like the both and approach. I don't think kids should get an allowance just for being alive because there's too much risk of entitlement there.
Hmm.
Can they be paid for some chores? Yes. Should they be paid for all chores? I don't think so. So if an allowance means they get $5 a week, no matter what their contribution is, no matter what their ownership is, then it's probably more hurtful than helpful. But having money is so helpful to be able to think about budgeting and saving for a particular goal. So I think it's great to give kids money. Right now, our kids have they have specific number of chores they have to do just for being part of the family. And if they go over and above that, because there are always some things on that little list that don't get done. There's too many jobs for all of us. Or there's seasonal stuff, right? There's raking leaves, there's shoveling snow, whatever. And so if they do anything extra, then they do get paid for those. And so I know some experts call that like a gig system. You get if you do a gig, you get paid. If you do a regular family responsibility, that's just, part of being part of that family team, that family culture. And so that's kind of where I am right now. I don't know. Yeah, did you do allowance?
Yes, and I don't feel great about how we're doing it, but I haven't found a better way of doing it. And so she does the dishes every single day. She empties the dishwasher. And that's kind of like, and then she helps out with other things. But when I give her an allowance, I give it to her and I say, thank you for everything that you do for the family.
Nice. So it's tied to.
Yeah. So I feel good about that. And I make sure that I say that every time. And then she's very good about holding on to her money and budgeting it and all that sort of thing. But it just, I don't know. I've heard of people saying, well, I would normally give you this amount, but because of taxes, I'm only going to give you this amount to teach them about taxes. But yeah,
Right.
I don't know what the right way is of doing it, but that's what I've chosen to do. But I still struggle with it, but it's
There's
what I've
so
done.
many, yeah, there's so many options. I just interviewed Amanda from Wallet Win, so I got to credit her for this on my podcast. And she said that once kids reach teenagerdom, they will figure out how much they would spend on that child on extracurriculars, clothing, everything, and give that child the money at the beginning of the month. And then the teenager has to make the decision, like, am I going to buy the Nike name brand sweatshirt? Or am I going to go to a consignment shop? Or maybe I don't need a sweatshirt and then I get $45 in my bank account. And I'm like, whoa, like that takes a really good budgeting parent to do that. I'm not sure I'm quite that organized, but it was
Right.
fascinating to think about allowing the child to just like keep whatever, not even child, allowing the teen to keep whatever they don't earn. I don't know. Yeah.
That's
It's
super
it's awesome.
interesting.
It's
And I
awesome
think
to watch kids learn.
I think it depends on the kid too, because like my daughter, I can't really get her to spend money. Like she'll go out with a friend and she'll get something to drink or whatever, but she's quite frugal. And
Me
so
too.
that's different than, having a kid who likes to spend. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Right. And yeah, that system, it's not something I've tried. Like I just heard the tip and I'm like, that's so fascinating. Because me, I'm all like, well, give kids knives, and see what happens. So,
Excellent. Well, Katie, thanks so much for joining me today. Where's the best place for people to find you? Oh, we've got a link that's going to go directly to your free gift. You want to talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. Yes. Speaking of knives, our members' favorite class to teach with their kids is our knife skills. Because when you're talking about eating real food and whole food, if you can't unlock the produce section with a knife, you can't get much done. And so we teach the same ways to hold the food and ways to move the knife to kids 2 years olds with butter knives or 12-year-olds with chef's knives. So I have this 10-minute knife skills and safety video at kidscookrealfood.com/energymd podcast. And so your readers or your listeners can go there and check it out. And because, again, with fatigue, maybe you're not able to stand at the counter and show your kids how to use the knife. So I'll do it for you. I'm happy to take that off your plate and you can sit at the table. And actually, P.S., the table is a perfect height for children age 10 or 12 and under. It's actually better for them to work at the table. So it's perfect. You can sit next to them. They're at belly button height. The counter is too tall for them anyway. And they can learn to cut up good, healthy, whole food and take ownership for you.
That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing. So it sounds like you're teaching kids how to cook.
Yes, our Kids Cook Real Food e-course teaches kids ages 2 to 12 the basic skills that they would need to follow just about any recipe. And then we're just developing, nearly finished with Teens Cook Real Food for ages 13 to 21. That'll release January 2026. And so it's bigger. That's much bigger. It includes grocery shopping and meal planning and a whole bunch more raw meat. That wasn't something I dug into real deep with the little kids. And just lots of nice skills, lots of real food. And with the teens, I've had so much fun working with them on how to think about what they want to eat. how when you cook, when you know how to cook, you get to make decisions. It actually gives you a freedom and it gives you choices because you can choose if you go to McDonald's, you can choose if you buy convenience food at the grocery store, or you can choose if you throw a whole chicken in your Instant Pot and make homemade broth and homemade soup. Like if you have the skills, you actually have more choices. Because I think teens, like that's their jam, right? Like they want to make choices, they want to be independent. And so it's really amazing to watch them learn how to be competent in the kitchen and feed other people. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing how that does out in the world.
I'm excited about that for sure. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience about you, about the topic that we covered today that I haven't addressed before we adjourn?
You admitted that you apologize often to your daughter and that you're not perfect. And so I think that's where we should end, is just reminding that all of us aren't perfect. We would all go back and redo things from a day before, a year before, 10 years before. And especially when you're hurting, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to maybe put off some of this stuff until a day when you have some energy. But also that family team is indispensable. That on a day when you do have energy, keep that in mind. Like, oh, Katie said, maybe I could, teach a skill to my child and that child can take responsibility and ownership and contribute. And it's such a beautiful thing that will come back to you with many, many returns.
Yeah, this has been a really great conversation. Katie, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Evan.
So if you have chronic fatigue, whether it's from long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome, go ahead and click the link below to watch my latest masterclass, where I go deep into our 4-step process that has helped thousands of others resolve their symptoms naturally. After you watch that video, if you're interested in seeing if we're a good fit to work together, you can then get on a free call with me. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you over there. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening and have an amazing day.